So we thought we're going to do this monthly, open conversation monthly, having with our advisory board members, hosting different ones. Michael's on our advisory board, and we thought maybe the first one would be appropriate as economic development. And Susan and I are both prior chairs of GNOE from the North Shore. The third chair, Maura Donahue, from the North Shore, could not be with us today. So we thought maybe the three chairs of GNO Inc. should be the first ones to talk. But you'll have other ones along the way each month. We'll have Leslie Landry, who's on our advisory board, talk about the nonprofits in a couple of months, which is Susan started that. So, but we're going to talk about economic development. And, you know, what I want to say, having chaired GNO Inc., having chaired St. Tammany Corporation, economic development means different things to different people, you know. To some people, particularly over here, economic development is a bad word. You know, it means growth, and it means traffic, and it means, you know, pollution and trucks and things that you don't, you know, that a lot of people don't want. For other people, economic development, and particularly for people like members at Pallet, small businesses, economic development is a completely different concept. And we're going to talk about some of the big wins here, but you know, those are the ones that tend to get the headlines. But we also want to kind of drill down into what is going on for small businesses in Louisiana, in the region, and the resources available for small businesses. And there's so much to talk about. I know these two people need no introduction. You know, Michael Hecht, CEO of GNO Inc., Susan Bonnett, the Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development.
Smart use the new name.
And
I love it.
But there's so much to talk about with these two. We could start anywhere, but I really want to start, Michael, with you, because you were here at the beginning.
Yep.
When I became the first chair. You had just been hired as GNO Inc. CEO, and I became chair over here, and then you and I got together over here and said, what should we do on the North Shore, you know, that would be appropriate? And we thought about opening up a hub. And we got in the paper.
Oh, wow.
Michael, why don't you tell this story? How successful
you're
we
a
were.
child.
Yeah,
Michael, you don't have gray hair here. I see.
Oh, my
Why don't you tell us how successful you were?
Yeah, so we failed. But we were just ahead of our time. So
That's right.
You know,
15 years.
15 years ahead of our time. You know, right place, wrong time. And no, we actually had a concept of doing something, I think not as developed as Pallet, but it was meant to be an entrepreneurship hub. And the idea was that we wanted to start cultivating young talent on the North Shore. And so we found this space. It was off of Rail Avenue, right?
No.
No, off of
No, that's Hammond.
It's now the Abita roasting place in the Files building.
Okay, which what it meant to be.
Old Covington.
And so we developed it. There was a building in New Orleans that had been pretty successful post Katrina called the Intellectual Property Building, with the unfortunate acronym of IP. And so this one was the IP North.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't the right name. It was like selling this Chevy Nova in South America. But I think that honestly, it was just something that was, the timing wasn't quite right. And it was a combination of the growth of the North Shore combined really with what COVID did and how it changed people's working habits and how co-working has become much more popular now, that I think that's why this place is taking off. But I do appreciate that it's happening because it to some degree, I don't know if it validates us, but it makes us feel like we were just less wrong in the first place.
Never wrong.
Never wrong, just the wrong time.
And put it right there. Susan, I want to, before we talk at the state level, I want to go back to before that with North Shore Community Foundation. You know, you started the North Shore Community Foundation in 2007 or so.
Yep.
With the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, seed money, and you ran that for 17 years or whatever until you moved on to this other position. Talk about how the community foundations, the critical role, if you would, particularly for economic development, how it relates and why that's important.
Yeah, I think it was, it's a really important perspective for me to have in my current role. Because so when we started the community foundation back then, it was really with this intention of what everyone in this room knows, but we struggled with identifying post-Katrina, was that the North Shore really did have a separate, but very related to the South Shore, but separate identity, separate sort of vision for a future. And so it was trying to coalesce around that. But this was pre-St. Tammany Corporation, right? We had some economic development function that was happening here, but it wasn't
Use the right word.
I know, I'm good. There was potential for more. Let me say it that way. So when I got started working with the foundation and we got involved, and a traditional community foundation really is just purely philanthropically rooted, first and foremost. But what I realized very quickly was that it was like unscrambling an egg. There was no decoupling quality of life, quality of place, economic development, philanthropy, wealth generation, right? All those things they're actually just an ecosystem that have to feed one another. And it's why I think we were able to be successful at the foundation. You know, I say all the time, we started with a good idea. I mean, it's really all it was. It was a good idea. And by the time I left, we had moved about $100 million through the 4 parishes of the North Shore region from a philanthropic perspective. But all of that was not, it just wasn't pure, it was 501c3 by IRS standards, right? All the money we gave had to go to a 501c3, but its benefit, it's what it did. It was driving economies, it was driving prosperity, it was driving support systems, it was driving social service networks, it was driving all that, which that's all part and parcel, right? I think Michael does a really good job of continually identifying that in economic development. I steal his words all the time. There's sort of product and there's project, right? There's projects and the projects matter. But without the product, which is that quality of life, quality of place, what you're selling, the projects they're not less relevant, but they're frankly a lot harder to get. Right. So there's no decoupling all of that, and I think it just worked well for us over here. But it has been a very good position for me to launch to the state because there are not a lot of other communities that understand that.
So I'm glad you mentioned the project and the product. I actually had that too, because when you first came on board at GNO Inc, Michael, it was not that long after Katrina, and there was a lot of things broken, not just in the city and then the state. I really want both of y'all maybe to address the product issue, like how has the product, being what are we selling to companies, whether it be companies moving in or whether it be small businesses or entrepreneurs starting businesses, how has the product changed, both in the greater New Orleans region, Michael, and at the state level, Susan?
Yeah.
So, I think just to go back to what Susan said, the definition of economic development that seems to be the best kind of North Star for us and also for Rachel was with me from the beginning. Of course, she went on to figure out better things. Yeah.
But she's with me now.
Yes.
Just saying.
She was before the beginning.
That's right. She was.
She was with me before she was with
Before with you. You're right.
That's right. Today is Denise's 19th anniversary, by the way, can text her. Yeah. Is that economic development is about creating the conditions where businesses want to risk their capital and people want to raise their families. Mm-hmm. And when you take that approach, I think you begin to understand, the whole ecosystem or syndrome that it is, like Susan was saying. And I think it's one of the reasons that we now see at LED this whole of government approach, because it's recognized that if you do economic development in a vacuum or a silo, which is how it's traditionally done, it's just a sales process. And it's a bit like, selling a car that you have no feedback loop into about designing a better car. And if you're, trying to sell a lemon, the word's going to get out and it's not going to be that effective. So this is something at the very beginning where we recognize that the New Orleans as a city, greater New Orleans as a region, and frankly, Louisiana as a state had a real product problem. And part of that was perception that we were just a place to party, but not a place to build a business or to raise a family. And part of that was reality, low education outcome, poor health outcomes, a training system that wasn't what it needed to be. And so I think that we pivoted really early on, where instead of focusing primarily on selling the projects, we said, let's develop the first level of Maslow's hierarchy, which is the product. And so now at GNO Inc. and I'd argue to a large degree even at the state, probably the majority of our resources are on public policy, on workforce training, and now we've even gone so far as to get involved in public safety and pre-K education. We're working to get with NORD in New Orleans to get better parks. Because if you look at the places that are really blowing and going around the country right now, like Dallas-Fort Worth is an excellent example, they're doing so because they've got this product where they're affordable, where the schools are high quality, where there's a lack of burdensome regulation that is kind of like the old Honda selling itself. And so now, the majority of our mental energy and money is actually spent on that product.
And how about at the state level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, clearly we within LED, but more importantly, there's nothing I can affect in that bigger picture without that coming from the top. The governor made it clear from day one that it was everybody's job, and at least his administration, to drive a better economy for Louisiana. And so there's sort of, it's really not two trains. There's a lot of trains running at the same time. But first of all, from a public policy perspective, that was triple P's, that was good, a lot of alliteration. From a public policy perspective, Louisiana has made, this isn't specific to Jeff Landry, although I absolutely give him a lot of credit for leading this charge. The legislature has done this. The amount of policy change we've made in the last 18 months really is remarkable. It's massive, and I think it's understated because we keep doing so much so fast. From public safety to education, we don't tell these stories enough, but Louisiana, if you don't know this, I'm going to tell you this. Louisiana now ranks 16th in the country for fourth grade reading numbers. We didn't go up 16. We are ranked 16. Like, that's unheard of in Louisiana. There are real documentable changes in progress taking place in everything we're doing. And so there's sort of the actual progress. Then there's the concept of the progress, right? We have Louisiana, Michael said it, I say it in every speech I give. We have long had a reputational problem. Some of it's reality, a lot of it's perception. And we as Louisianians have fed into that perception as bad as anyone. We are our own worst enemies. We are the amplifiers of the negative in many respects. So it's that perception and reality piece that we're combating. But the product is just getting way better. And there is a national buzz, and even to some degree an international buzz, of this, holy cow, what's going on there? Like, there's a curiosity now about what's going on in Louisiana and what's different. Using things like we did with the Super Bowl to get the world to look at us a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Using any stage.
I mean, the issue is that it's what I'm hopeful for is we can keep this team together for a full 8 years, because in 8 to 10 years we can begin to, I think, change the narrative in a sustainable way, apart from even changing the reality. The challenge is that the perception, and it's specifically a perception about New Orleans, but I think it bleeds to the whole state,
Yes.
as being kind of the city that people want to date but not marry, right? A lot of fun for a hot weekend, but but when I want to bring it home to the parents, I'm going to bring Charlotte, or Dallas, or Nashville, not NOLA. NOLA's like the abusive relationship where it's just so hot sometimes you can't get out of it, but
Actually on Facebook Live, Michael, yes.
Anyway, delete that. And so it is. It is a.
Okay, moving on.
You need a 10-to-1 ratio of good to bad, narrative and reality to begin to get out of it. However, it is possible, and you can think of some places that have done it, like Miami. When in the 80s, Miami was, Miami Vice and Cocaine Cowboys and that whole vibe, and now it's become kind of this place which is this sophisticated Eurocentric, maybe crypto hub, and so it can happen over time. A place can change its reputation. North Carolina is an incredible story, right? Going from tobacco fields and furniture manufacturing,
Textiles.
today, number 3 in the country for NIH grants. So it's possible, but it does take sustained effort.
Agreed.
So I want to focus on some of the small business initiatives that I think is interesting to a lot of the people here. First of all, Michael, you mentioned the IP building back in New Orleans, and we were talking IP. And back when, I don't know if it was the first Idea Village. Idea Village, which our friend Tim Williamson started back in 2000, and some friends as he said, at a bar on the back of a napkin, started the idea of the Idea Village, about why we needed to cultivate an ecosystem for entrepreneurship in New Orleans before its time, maybe. But it was 2000, and I looked up on their website yesterday just some impact numbers from them. It said since 2000, they've served 20,000 entrepreneurs and $1.7 billion of exit value by the alums of Idea Village, and almost 100,000 mentor hours. And that's just kind of the high level for Idea Village. So I wanted maybe to talk about the impact of that, or the importance of that as far as starting, maybe how that relates to Palette here on the North Shore that we tried unsuccessfully to do 15 years ago. And then also you have, within GNO Inc., I know you have Evie, part of it, that's a director of innovations and entrepreneurship. What does that mean? And then I'm going to pivot to you, Susan, to talk about the LAIO program.
Yep.
And so, Michael?
I think that the way to think about it is that there's 3 legs to the stool of business growth and job creation. So one is existing businesses, and it's incredibly important and usually kind of the afterthought to make sure that you're supporting and cultivating those existing businesses. So it could be a Pool Corp or a Chevron here. And sometimes we take those businesses for granted, and that's a mistake because by the time you're not, it can be too late. Then the second is attracting new businesses here. We passed Global Star coming in. That's a great example. We brought Global Star over from California. Let's say it was 2009. I mean, it was early on, and they've had an interesting trajectory, but I think it's going to work, and they're going to be huge over time. But then the third leg is bringing new businesses online. And that's a critical part of the ecosystem for a few reasons. One is obviously the job creation. You need to be, and many of these businesses will grow, like NetChex is probably a good example here. The second is the energy that they bring, and the opportunity that they bring, and the fact that it gives our young people an idea of what they can do if they're not going to go into, the family business. But the third is one that we've seen a lot of evidence of recently, and that is that ever since the 80s, there's been a lot of M&A activity in the country. And recently, it's been private equity activity specifically. And there's going to be this always a challenge for second-tier communities in terms of size, that the private equity firms are going to come in and they're going to buy out the companies. And regardless of what people say, over time, that will kind of bleed out these old line firms. And when you lose those old line firms, you're not only losing the top jobs and philanthropy, but you also tend to lose those pillars of the community who are willing to fight for the community because their family and their business is there. So we have to always be regenerating new businesses, because a place like Greater New Orleans is always going to be building these kind of sandcastles by the seashore with the tide coming in of M&A. And so there's a regenerative component of it that I think is critical over time.
Yeah. And we have to, just to piggyback on that, there's so many related but sort of disparate points about all that I want to make. But just on that particular statement, the other piece that we've been not very good at, that we at the state level are trying to pay a lot more attention to, is having the venture capital here to be able to try to keep some of that in Louisiana. Because it's not just, the M&A activities is it's not problematic. It is what it is, right? But the fact that that money is coming from other places, just by the very nature of it, does feel like a little bit of a sucking noise we're all hearing over here. So while we're also trying to continually regenerate the business side of it, we have to create the capital here as well, and an attention to that. You know, it again, this is one of the places I think one of my strengths is knowing what I don't know, and I will tell you, this is not what I know, right? This is why I hired Josh Flake, also away from Michael. I'm very sorry for that, to lead in this
Speaking of
space.
regeneration.
To lead in this space, but all things, we're doing it under the innovation brand. You know, we're creating a whole innovation brand within LED to make sure that Louisiana is not just building and supporting and investing in those really the second stage companies, but also creating an ecosystem for the capital. Like, there's a whole world of that we haven't touched in a very long time. And there are a lot of places Louisiana's playing from behind. This is one of them, but there's a heightened focus on it, and it just makes immense sense. Like, if you just look at the numbers in Louisiana, 99.5% of Louisiana businesses, identified Louisiana businesses, are federally designated small businesses. 99.5. More than 52% of every employee in Louisiana is employed by a small business. Like, but, and I get it, it's sort of our job, and it's the challenge and the opportunity that we have. You know, the Meta and the Hyundai announcements are the ones that get the flash. But the real sort of foundational, fundamental ecosystem, again with that word, has to happen at this level that we're talking about, in every part of it, from starting the businesses to growing the businesses to scaling the businesses to making sure when they're acquired, some of that staying here. Every level of that, we have to work at building that.
You know, we've known each other too long, because now you said something that I always say to Amanda's back there, saying, we say, you don't know what you don't know. And I certainly don't know what I don't know. And we say a lot of people, small businesses, people starting businesses, you don't know what you don't know. You know, that's one of the reasons they join a place like Palettes, because it's like, I know I have this idea, and I know, you know, I want to start this business, but I don't know anything about, you know, social media. I don't know anything about taxes. I don't know anything. And this is where, you know, a place like Palette can help connect people to the things that they don't know. And we have a lot of those questions, you know, people joining, well, how do I learn about this? And how do I, you know, and so a lot of our membership are people connecting with others to help them in the areas that they don't know. And, you know, some of this is, how do I grow my company? How do I access to capital? You know, and it's like, how do you go from a startup to a scale up, to a scale up to the next generation, and then ultimately then, if you're an exit, there's all kinds of different levels. Y'all mentioned money, access to capital and financing, and we're behind, although there's more focus. Can you talk a little bit, at least about say small businesses at all those different levels? The startup, the scale up, the one, and then the exit to capital, and if they exit, that they're not bought out by people out of Louisiana. What sources are available for small businesses here in Louisiana for those different access to capital?
Yeah, so this is one where everyone should call Josh. No, truth be told. So we had, one of the first challenges I had when I went into the department was trying to understand, both from a staff complement, a resource complement, and a workflow, how we have a staff of 200 people, how much time we spend, like what's small business really, right? And where are we investing our time, our resources? And so this might not be a popular opinion in this room, but I think most of y'all can understand it. We decided early on that LED, the state agency for economic development, doesn't have a play in the startup, small business, one-to-one kind of direct space, right? There's just too much of that for us to be. We have our regional partners like GNO Inc. And, you know, in state government, everything's an acronym. We call them REDOs, Regional Economic Development Organizations. There are 8 of them that we have formal relationships with. And so we as a state agency believe that first and foremost, that role has to start at the local level. Then as the other pieces come in, we are really trying to create an ecosystem where first and foremost, once a business exists and it's building and it needs resources, that's where LED starts coming in with the first layer, and that's sort of our small business work. We call it the Louisiana Growth Network, right? So we have our Louisiana Growth Network, which has a lot of programs and opportunities, from CEO roundtables to trainings to partnerships with other organizations. And then we go from there. We have capital, right? The state, LED has capital to deploy into small businesses through LEAD-AC, another acronym, of course. And now with our most recent strategic plan inside the department, there's an incredibly heightened focus on building that capital, building access to that capital. But it's also doing things like, everyone knows in Louisiana, every individual public governed body has a different retirement system, right? Teray, I'm looking at you. Higher ed has its own retirement system. Teachers have their own retirement system. Did you know that school employees have a different retirement system than teachers? There's two different retirement systems just within. Anyway, that's a whole soapbox. But what I'm saying is, you know what all those retirement systems are? They're investment pools of money. Do you know that right now, virtually none of them are investing Louisiana's retirement money in Louisiana opportunities?
Which is unusual. It's other states do.
Because other
they
states,
figured that part out.
oh, it's the first access to capital, right? We don't do it at all. So the good news is there's incredible opportunity to start turning loose, or at least accessing some of that capital, some of the risk capital, so that Louisiana retirement pools and pension funds, which are sitting on a lot of managed money right now, have the ability to deploy that into the very businesses that are in this room. That system didn't exist. That intention, that focus, those relationships, that didn't exist 6 months ago. So just things like the levels of opportunity in all of this are really tremendous. And to Louisiana's credit, and I do credit Josh with this, we have leveraged a lot of federal dollars. Reputationally, 18 months ago when I took this job, the first thing Michael looked at me and he said, you've got to clean up SSBCI. Again, another acronym. Did you not?
Yeah.
All right. And now we're ranked one of the top 2 best in the country, and the feds are just giving us more money for it. So we have access to dollars, and I think we are deploying them much more effectively than we ever have. But I also look to our redos to do a lot of this help.
Yeah, but I want to give, a ton of credit to Susan and to Josh and LED. You mentioned LA.io. We should talk about that.
Yeah, all right.
And it's not just that what it's doing right now is interesting in terms of driving innovation, but the fact that it exists is even more significant, because in maybe hundreds of years of history, Louisiana has never had a dedicated innovation function in government. Innovation just had to kind of happen organically from the private sector. And so the fact that now we have a government partner in it who is leading it programmatically and policy-wise, so things like the angel investor tax credit, but also legitimizing it, I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and Susan, like you mentioned, because I looked in the LAIO too.
Yeah.
It's early stage founders, resources, SSBCI funding, access to capital, coaching, and connections to launch and grow a small business. So I agree with you, Mike. Just having it and having somebody like Josh running it is significant. But what is it doing?
Well, yeah, it's doing a lot. It's doing all those things. Well, right.
It's like a
What is it?
It's a lot of things, and I think that's part of the challenge. So we'll talk about just the innovation piece in a minute, but purely on the small business sort of support side, last year we quantified that just our LED-led work in the small business space, meaning with other partners, but the ones we're facilitating, we're touching, we supported 13,000 small businesses in Louisiana just last year. Those are very significant numbers when it relates to small business. And again, it's coaching, it's connections, it's access to consultants, it's access to, I always give the example, my husband was in a Vistage group for a long time. LED has like an in-house Vistage group. You don't, I hope there are no Vistage people in the room or on Facebook Live, but if you don't have the ability to spend those resources on that kind of coaching, on that kind of support, those systems exist within LED and within our regional partners already. But I do want to pivot a little bit to the innovation piece. So we created this innovation brand, and our small business work is living under that, right? But I don't want to lose focus on the innovation part of the innovation brand, which really has this very specific intentionality around how do we take everything Louisiana's been good at for a long time. A lot of our legacy work, think energy, think process industries, think shipbuilding, think those things, logistics, right? And then how do you not look at the reality that AI technology is the future, period, right? It's the future of the world. It's the future of the world economy. And if we, Louisiana, keep giving away the right to have the technology piece and that piece overlaid on what we're already good at, someone else is going to do it. And so we've sort of stuck a stake in the ground that says, we can be the next Silicon Valley for the things that we're already good at. So just 2 weeks ago, I did a ribbon cutting at a facility in Franklin, Louisiana, which is in St. Mary Parish, which was a shuttered shipbuilding facility back from our shipbuilding heyday, which is now reopened as a shipbuilding facility, but they're building unmanned marine vessels for the U.S. Navy, completely autonomous marine vessels. And the biggest part, Saronic is the name of the company, but some of the primary investors in Saronic are the biggest venture capitalists from Silicon Valley. Right. And it's their first investment in Louisiana. So it's a great story about shipbuilding, legacy industry. Our workforce is so good in that kind of space. And bolting on technology to it creates a whole innovation story that Louisiana is primed for. Oh, and now the wealthiest people in the country, hopefully the world ultimately, are paying attention to what we're doing here and investing in it. That's what we're talking about, the layers.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up AI in the impact. Obviously, we all know the impact of AI. I mean, we all are learning the impact of AI. I talk to my AI chat buddy every morning and get advice. I know it's not.
Does he tell you you're smart, you're kind, and you're beautiful, or what?
He tells me, you are really stupid.
That's the problem with Chad. No matter what he asks, he goes, "That's a good question." It's like you're
Absolutely. It's condescending,
right? It's kind of like
He told me something yesterday, and I asked him something about the nonprofit I started. Just one voice I asked, and I didn't. Never. He goes, "Oh, that's a nonprofit you're associated with." I'm going,
how do you know that?
I'm going, oh, how did you know that's so scary? But the point I was gonna make is it is impacting all of us, and it's going to impact us all for generations to come. It's, and obviously some people are scared of it. It's going to impact, some people are going to lose their jobs because of it, but it's also going to create a lot of opportunities for other people. I'm fascinated about, and I hope that Ochsner does something on AI and how that's impacting the healthcare. They're our corporate partners, because I'm fascinated about, AI and healthcare particularly. But I read an article in the New York Times, I don't know, about a month ago, about the impact of AI on entrepreneurship and how it's accelerating new businesses because people, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, AI can help you know what you don't know. Right. You don't have to have I'll ask AI about taxes. I ask AI about this. I don't need to know that. Because AI can help me. So it's accelerating small businesses, new businesses, entrepreneurship, people not wanting to work in a big company. They wanted to create their own ideas, and AI is now helping accelerate that, creating a brand, creating all this. So isn't AI just going to accelerate this whole trend of entrepreneurship and small businesses as we look forward?
It's Sam Altman's talking about how we're going to soon have our first sole proprietor unicorn, our first one-person company that sells for $1 billion. It's all happening. I mean, I think people the consensus is that AI is going to be, bigger, way bigger than the internet, maybe as big as fire. I mean, it's going to change everything. We're all becoming cyborgs, and at some point, it's going to come and eat our faces off. But until then, I think so. When people talk about the Meta deal up in the northeast of the state, and they tend to focus on the jobs, if they're for it, and what it's going to do for one of the most impoverished parts of the country. If they're against it, they talk about the energy use. But I think from a economic development standpoint, and getting back to this first point we talked about, which is the narrative about the state, it's incredibly significant to have this narrative that Louisiana is getting into the AI game with Meta, and have Zuckerberg talking about it, and have the president talking about how it's going to be a $50 billion investment, even if we don't know exactly where that came from, because we need Louisiana to be seen as kind of the kindler, gentler Texas, the place that has a lot of the assets, a lot of the similar geology, same geography, but that doesn't suffer from winning like Texas does. And if we can do that, then we're going to begin to be able to get that attention and get that investment from, the biggest investors in the world. And it'll begin to get us into this virtuous cycle of development. And we haven't been in that virtuous cycle arguably since the 80s.
Yeah, so I want to talk high level. The Meta piece is a good place to start, but then I want to talk specifically about some of the things we're doing inside the department, which are really pretty amazing, and they're going to become like just quick rollout aggressive very soon. First and foremost, when we made the Meta announcement, it was one of the first of, wait, what's happening in Louisiana? Why is Mark Zuckerberg doing that there? Stand by, while I appreciate the president tweeting about Louisiana, I sometimes say this is announcement by 1,000 tweets. I think there's lots more to come on that. However, what we internal to the department and the governor went all in on, decided when we made the Meta announcement, was that if you really look at states right now and you look at the technology around AI, you look at AI at the application level, there's no state that's winning yet, right? There's no winner. There's no clear leader in that. There is no one state that is associated with all the development and technology of that. And so we decided that we're not going to follow maybe a traditional Louisiana path where we just assume it can't be us and give it away. Right. Quite the opposite, speaking of healthcare, right? Or speaking of the logistics in the Mississippi River, or speaking of our resiliency opportunities, because we've learned so much from weather here. If you look at Louisiana as a laboratory, we actually have so much of the existing data and existing opportunities for AI applications to make a real difference, right? Perhaps negative health care outcomes, right? But if you look at, the silver lining of having such a large Medicaid population in Louisiana could be the data that's available to try to change some of those outcomes through AI, right? So if you look at potential healthcare outcomes, if you look at the fact of the traffic through the Mississippi River, through ultimately, right, the mouth, the Port of New Orleans, and all our ports and all our riverboat pilots and everything they know about the river and everything they know about logistics and distribution, or we know about that. All that data already exists. So why would we give away the lab that we already are? So the department is going all in on using everything Louisiana already knows and is good at and has expertise in, and making a run at being, we don't just want to be the building. We don't want Zuckerberg saying, I want, building there and I want to consume your energy. We want to be the intellectual leader in that too. And so we're leaning in very heavy on that. So that's the big picture conceptual piece. But then there's some very specific pieces, not the least of which is really relevant to this conversation. Time frames scare me, but I would say by second quarter of next year, safely, we, the department, will roll out it doesn't have a name yet, but we're calling it Entrepreneurism in a Box. And it is a technology toolkit, which will absolutely be fundamentally based around AI. That is all things small business and startup support. How do I do my taxes? What tax forms do I need to fill out? What reports do I need to file with the Secretary of State? It's entrepreneurism in a box, and that tool kit is going to exist, and it's going to be provided to the entire Louisiana ecosystem. Compliments of LED, I just said. Yeah. Trying. Yeah. we don't have the luxury of patience in our department right now. So I would say,
I know you.
yeah, me and my boss. You think I'm that way? The Energizer Bunny meets a little healthy ADD, and there's a lot happening there. And at any rate, so yeah, no matter what, so I've said publicly, this will be accomplished and done by the end of next year. We have a 9x90 work plan, which is a very aggressive work plan that I'm saying out loud because I want Louisiana to hold me and our department accountable for it. So no matter what, it's the end of next year. The end of second quarter of next year is the optimistic goal, but it's real.
I mean, the importance of having this entrepreneurship in a box is it gets back to this issue of not knowing what you don't know. The issue with AI is that if you know the right prompts, you can get some version of the right answer, although AI does lie like a 4-year-old, just like with like total impunity. But if you don't know the questions to ask, then you're not going to prompt it. So I think that to me is what's going to be most powerful is here are 10 things you have to do if you want to start your business and not go to jail, right? And so you can go through that and, then the rest is up to you. So it's what I love about this version of the state that we're in right now, which starts at the governor, goes down to LED and Susan, but then it's most of the cabinet members. It's just the energy is that it's forward-leaning, it's proactive, it's strategic, and it's holistic. And the reality is that we have had other forms of government which have been much more caretaking, much more mechanical, not nearly as strategic. And frankly, I think the greatest poverty that we've had in this state for a long time is the poverty of imagination. That is not the problem we have right now.
No, not at
right
all.
now we have the abundance
full
of
of ideas.
Yeah. And but look, it's I would much rather have our reach exceed our grasp than just to sit back and assume that we're just going to always be an oil and gas and tourism economy, because that's not enough anymore. Right.
I'm going to pause a second. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask?
No.
Nobody does. Okay.
Right. Shocking. Do you think Bradley has a question?
I think
Bradley.
Gronkowski has one.
Gronk.
That's Kelsey. Jason.
Kelsey. There. Well, that's weird. Okay, so not but get into this question now, because it may be on your kind of percolating in your brain already. Based on the folks in this room in the Northshore, it's a lot of small business. And I think one of the questions that I always get and see to always come up is, what's the best or simple way for me to access what resources your organization to have? What's the quickest way for me to get there, figure out if what I can be provided by you? If not you, are you a resource help point in administration at depth? So that one, and then I'll throw this other one out, which is more kind of a highlight conceptual. If either of you guys were in a position where they took the bridle off, you didn't have anybody reining you back, it was up to you to make certain decisions. Strategically, what do you think some of the things that, what are some of the things that you will do based on your position in order to push Louisiana and or New Orleans in the correct direction for a loss rate?
Yeah. Wow.
Damn.
So wait.
Take question one.
Yeah, you good. You take one. I'm taking two.
All right. Two.
Okay. Let's start with two.
Well, there are two really cool things about two. As you described all that, I mean what I'm about to say. I feel like I am in that position. Like this administration, and I'm not just pointing at the governor, this legislature, look at Rachel knows this. Every time we talk to people who have the ability to vote on public policy or fund what we want to do, you know what they're saying? Go. Like the unbelievable enthusiasm, support, and impatience in that unbright
fear, just a healthy amount, just a little soup song.
I haven't seen the fear yet. Have we seen the fear? I think there's trust, which puts a lot of. I was going to say that puts a little fear back in me, because there's a lot of trust right now that we are just going to go get good things done. So, but let me put an asterisk next to that. Your question is actually really important, because that is one of the most important things we as a department has realized, that at the end of the day, we can go do all these things and people are giving us a lot of latitude and leverage to go do them. But there's so many other policies that impact it all, right? if, going back to the conversation about product versus project, right, I'll tell you this exact story happened to me, and it sounds, it was just so metaphorical. I was driving to Baton Rouge, as I do every morning from Covington, and by the time I hit the 110 exit, I'm usually in a foul mood because I've been in traffic for a really long time. And Rachel and I commute together. I usually use that time for phone calls. So I'm working. Starting at about 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm working. And this particular morning, it had taken me an hour and 45 minutes to get there. And I make the 110 split, and I'm working my tail off by this point. I'm already tired, and I'm really mad from traffic. And I get behind an uncovered dump truck that is blowing trash on my car. Like huge chunks of actual garbage. And I'm in a state car, marked LED, and it's blowing giant chunks of garbage on my car.
Metaphor.
That's what I'm saying. It was this metaphorical, are you kidding me? Because I can be on the phone with Mark Zuckerberg getting meta here, and I have chunks of garbage falling on my LED car.
Yeah.
And so it's real, right? And so there are public policies that if I go into a committee meeting, technically have nothing to do with LED. That at the end of the day will hold my ability to be successful back, will hold all of your ability to be successful back, and will hold the state back. The good news is that we have now been charged with creating a one-pager of 10 things that say what are the 10 most important things we as a state need to be always looking at and hopefully always correcting to make what we do different. And the legislature is asking us for that, and the governor is asking us for that. And so being able to not just say, unbridle me, but I kind of feel like they have done that. Go do these other things. Who can change this rule or change this law or affect this regulation, go do this. There's a lot of that. So.
You want to take number one, Michael?
Oh, number one is the LED or GNO Inc website.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but really for if people who need resources, if you go to the Louisiana Economic Development, Louisiana Forward.
Yeah, but I would actually say start with your most local. I'm looking at Russell, right? You start with St. Tammany Corporation first if you're from St. Tammany. I mean, obviously.
yeah.
And then GNO Inc. Like I always say, go most local
GNO Inc,
first.
Yeah, because we've got, what we're starting at the region now is an entrepreneurship council, and that's going to have everybody who is a player in entrepreneurship is going to be coming together. And so we'll actually be, GNO Inc. is going to be the facilitator for that, for the node, but then super local, with Russell. I just wanted to add to what the secretary said in terms of kind of whether if a boy can dream. There are four things that I think lead to success for any political jurisdiction in terms of economic development, and the measure of that success is population. I mean, that is how we will know if we're winning. The fact that Louisiana's population actually flatlined last year and didn't go down means that we're maybe pulling back out.
We are 35,000 people.
Yeah, which is actually significant.
That's right. We'll take that. We'll take that.
Now there is still a challenge at the regional level. The population at the regional level went down about 2 to 3% over the last 10 years. There's a big problem in the city of New Orleans. It went down 10% over the last 10 years. So we have to turn that around. You turn that around by four things: by economic opportunity. Ultimately, that's the most important. People are going to move somewhere else for a job and just come back and visit family for festivals if they have to. The second is affordability. That's the complement.
Yeah.
We had a big call yesterday because we're working on trying to write some national legislation to deal with property insurance. Because right now it's gotten terribly unaffordable. That's a big issue, particularly on the South Shore, but it affects on the North Shore as well, and particularly in the east side of the parish. The third is quality of life, and that's a place where in some ways St. Tammany excels because it's spectacular here, but then when you hit the traffic, that's a negative quality of life. And so those are things that have to be balanced, but all those things have to be wrapped up in a vision. And I think that we now at the state level, and I hope at the regional level, have a vision of what we can be. It also is important at the local levels, and we haven't necessarily had that.
So I'm glad that y'all mentioned St. Tammany Corporation, the local level, and I wanted to welcome Russell. Yeah. Russell, who is this your first day?
I'm on my Fourth day. So
Fourth day, Russell is taking over as the CEO of St. Tammany Corporation, replacing Chris Massengill, who had been here for 7 years. I was actually involved in hiring Chris Massengill. Involved in hiring. I told him, I said, I really like being involved in hiring people that make me look good.
Be a recruiter.
Because I'm a recruiter, right?
You
So I was on the search, and I chaired St. Tammany Corporation for a number of years. And actually, one of the things that I was excited about, besides hiring Chris, and he did a great job until he moved on, Russell, I know you will. But I wanted to, I'm gonna call on you, Chenzo, and invite you to come up a second here. Because
Come on down.
talking to Facebook, because one of the things that we started 3 years ago through Chris is with Idea Village, was to start the Northshore Startup program, and which virtual training for startups on the North Shore, and it was a 10 or 11 week program, and we hired an entrepreneur in residence, which is Chenzo Corona.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that it's been 3 years is pretty incredible since joining Start of Northshore, and this is, certainly a vision that Marty, if you look at this picture, is something 15 years in the making that we come to today. But over the course of 3 years since leading Start of Northshore, which is an entrepreneurial support or initiative, really, underneath or championed by St. Tammany Economic Development Corporation, but in partnership with Tangipahoa Economic Development Foundation and Washington Parish Economic Development Foundation. At the end here, I saw her earlier. There she is, taking over there. I'm excited to start working with her going forward, but really looking at supporting businesses as a regional effort, in the North Shore, and what we can accomplish together versus just as St. Tammany. And so over that course of 3 years, where all of these conversations and these support mechanisms were all happening in such a siloed manner. If you wanted to start a business, you'd call your one buddy that you knew that started a business before, and try to get support and parlay that conversation into multiple more. I say, 90% of my job in coaching capital and connections is just reducing the degrees of freedom to the resource that helps you the most when you most need it at that time. And so over the course of 3 years, we've served well over 200 plus entrepreneurs, all the way from people with just an idea on a backhoe napkin, which is the most fun part to start, because the naivety and delusion and excitement is at a peak. And so we help them kind of
Sounds like a narration.
take that one, yeah. And so, helping people shape this vision for something that they have a passion about, and turn that into something that really has legs. Helping over 200 plus people do that. One of the most exciting parts, or I guess most amazing things that I've seen since starting this is, I grew up here. I'm from this area, born and raised. This place means a lot to me to be able to serve in this capacity. But you see that from so many folks, everyone in this room today, everyone on this panel here. We saw that in reaching out to entrepreneurs that had done it before, or people with a subject matter expertise. There is no twisting of arms to get them involved, to get to the point where we have over 50 mentors in our network that range from all different backgrounds, all different skill sets, all different expertises, all different industries. I'm the first person to tell you what I don't know. I'm not one of those, entrepreneur in residences who tries to pretend that I know everything. I'll be the first one to stop and say, look, this really isn't, my sweet spot. I'm going to do a lot of research. I'm going to figure out how I can help you. But what I can do is connect you with somebody who knows a lot more than me. And the mentors that have come and given over 600 plus hours, to our ecosystem, support local businesses, has been really, really incredible to see. When you think about capital, we want to help connect businesses to capital, whether that's debt capital, so a loan, whether that's equity, in an investment, or ideally if we can help them get a grant where you don't have to give up you don't have to go into any further debt, you don't have to give up any control or decision making of your company. That capital is really hard to come by. We've given over $75,000 to local businesses through pitch competitions where we get the community together. We're certainly going to do a lot of that with Palette going forward. We're certainly going to try and connect all of our resources together. to grow businesses. We're only stronger together. Ecosystems need spaces like this to be successful. And so to see this come to fruition, to be able to serve on the advisory board here, to be able to come spend, I think every other week I'll be in this space, hosting office hours to meet with local entrepreneurs. This moment right now is a really exciting one. And how do we go forward? How do we scale what's worked? How do we plug holes in what didn't work? How do we think about, now that we've really successfully gone an inch deep and a mile wide, how do we think about those industries that we're best at, pick a few verticals, an inch wide and a mile deep, and start really scale and get those unicorns that we're talking about.
When as I said, when we hired Chenzo, that was the idea that I dreamed about 15 years ago, to do something like that, because it was a good start. It was a virtual thing, but then after we got started, over time, we'd sit down and I'd have lunch with you and say, well, what's next? And you kept saying, we need a place, because it's, the virtual is good, but it's nothing like being together and having a hub where people come and you just have ideas that kind of organically grow up. And our place to have every time you have to have an event over here, you have to find a restaurant or you have to find a place. And then so it's just, so we kept saying, oh, that's the next thing, and then lo and behold, here we are now in this place. And I know that you're planning a series of educational events for the group here over the next 12 months, so that will be exciting to see how phase 2 goes.
Yeah, it's, how do we continue to listen to what our entrepreneurs need, design programming to deliver that specifically, connect with our regional partners, at GNO Inc. And, you see a New Orleans food and beverage ecosystem meetup coming up here on September 17th. That'll be in this space, first time at food and beverage.
Cool.
No fad meetup has ever come to the Northshore with our partners. We've helped bring that here. And then at the state, and, I work closely with Josh Fleeg and LAIO, to connect businesses to the SSBCI program and some of the technical assistance that we're doing in partnership with that program. It's really critical. We've spent so much focus on educating entrepreneurs and getting them in the space where when they get that capital, it's just dumping gas on a fire at that point.
So a couple of rapid fire questions here as we kind of get toward the end. Yeah, Michael, y'all have mentioned the governor, your boss, and how he has enough big ideas. Michael, he tasked you with spending $250 million for infrastructure for the Super Bowl. You're good at spending money.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you got the infrastructure, so that was,
That's huge.
congratulations on that. That was great. And now you're charged with the port, the Louisiana
Yes.
International
Tell us about
Terminal Port in Violet, to sort through those muddy waters, and also the road work that goes around to make it even feasible. Is that going to happen? It's because obviously even it has an impact not just on the port,
Yes.
on the whole state and on St. Tammany. But
Yes.
is it going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen for a number of reasons. The most important one is, just like the Super Bowl, it has to happen. We were founded 300 years ago because of the river and because of the port system. We serve 32 states and 2 provinces. And the reality is that because of the bigger ships, the current bridge, the Crescent City connection, there's not enough draft height to get under them. So if we want to stay in the shipping business, which is the reason why we exist, we have to do this. So yes, it is going to happen. The road is also going to happen, which is the kind of political and logistical linchpin for the project. And it's also going to happen because, and really my role is that to the degree that there's opposition to the port, a lot of it has come up from a small group of individuals who have just been able to talk about it without anybody talking about the real facts of the situation for many years. I'm particularly able to talk about it because I raised my family about 500 yards from the existing port. And so I can speak firsthand to the fact that it doesn't ruin a neighborhood, and that it actually can enhance value. And so but most importantly, and this is, in the Super Bowl it was similar, is that to some degree, I and GNO Inc. are just the window dressing. The fact that the governor was willing to put himself out in front and say, I want this to happen, that's really what motivates people. And then I'm just there as the manifestation of the fourth floor.
Of his will.
Yes, of his
will.
Can you maybe talk about in St. Tammany Corporation the importance of the port, not just for New Orleans, but like St. Tammany in economic development over here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, Michael's often said the curse of riches. We've taken so much of our assets for granted for so long as a region, as a state. This isn't regional, this is a state conversation. But if you look at the power of the Mississippi River, if you look at the power, frankly, of the Mississippi River, of everything south of the bridge in Baton Rouge, and the commerce and the access to the globe and the access to what it provides us, we have done a unfortunately relatively Louisiana job in taking some of those things for granted and not positioning it to be the asset that it absolutely is. And so if you look at the opportunity there, but then if you look at some of the other geographic realities, right? So the St. Tammany side of all things South Louisiana port system and our infrastructure and our interstate system and our connectivity, it positions St. Tammany specifically very well for the distribution and logistics side of what comes through the mouth of the river. And that's a part and parcel to the potential success of this parish in a far more traditional economic development sense. It's what the whole development at 1088 is based on. Chris Massengill, prior to Russell, did, I think, a really remarkable job of making sure there was a plan for it. There was a very strategic, thoughtful process that went into how do we play to our strengths? What's our play here? And our play is the distribution and logistics side of what happens in the Port of New Orleans. It just is.
That's right. And the three areas that are going to benefit the most from the port outside of the immediate area around it are New Orleans East, Slidell, and then the Gulf South Commerce Park. And if you want to understand what that means, just look at Mobile, where they've been investing a lot more than we have for a lot longer time. And you've got the Walmart distribution center. You've got the Amazon distribution center that's all the way up in Montgomery, which is over 100 miles away. So there are going to be enormous opportunities in warehousing, in distribution, in light manufacturing that are going to be related to what that port does. And a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurship within those, because there's a lot of innovation that's happening there as well.
Yep.
I just want to get some personal thoughts. Michael, you started before this. You started a small business, a restaurant in San Francisco. And Susan, you were the startup of Northshore Community Foundation. So you were there, the startup. So like startup small businesses, and we were talking about this the other day, Amanda and I, about you learn more about the mistakes you made, the successes you've had. And as former CEO of Sterling over those years, I could tell you a lot of the mistakes I made and lessons learned. I hired Bradley.
That was a success.
That was mistake made, lesson learned.
Yeah,
I won't tell you
right.
which one it is. But no, mistakes made, lessons learned. So tell me from a small business perspective or a startup perspective, some mistakes that you made and lessons learned for takeaways here.
The biggest lesson I learned, which protects me every day here, is that I learned this in the restaurant business, is that people want to be acknowledged and heard even more than they want their problem solved. So the best thing that you can do is go and listen to somebody and say, tell me why you're upset or what's going on. And if you can solve the problem, that's lagniappe. The worst thing you can do is ignore it and assume the problem's going to go away, because it doesn't. It just festers. And that's whether you're running your own company or doing economic development or dealing with a friend or family member. So yeah, I learned a lot. Everybody should be an entrepreneur at least once, because you do learn lessons that you will not learn in any other sphere of your life.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my lesson's probably going to land very close to yours. So, most of what I did, I guess the fundamental task of what I did in many regards when we built the foundation really was about fundraising, right? And there's this old adage in fundraising, and it's true, and this was a real battle I had all along, fundraisers will say, don't raise money out of your own checkbook. And what that meant was, don't put limitations on the ask. Don't put limitations on the gift based on what you think you would be capable of or based on what you think you're comfortable with. That was always very difficult for me, that stretch, right? And I would say if I had a real shortcoming in my role at the foundation was I a limiting factor, right? Could we have done more? Could we have been more? Could we have raised more? Could we have done more? Because it was always hard for me to break out of, the don't raise money out of your own checkbook mentality. However, this is really relevant to the St. Tammany people in the room. The other part of that, or maybe the larger explanation of that, is it's very easy to be captured by your own perception. And your own perception becomes your truth, and therefore it becomes limiting by the very nature of it being your perception. And so I lived the Northshore world of growth and economic development and NIMBYism and what's good, what we need and what we don't need, and what we'll accept and what we won't accept. And so by just the very nature of being limited by your own perception, it wasn't till I got to Baton Rouge and now have to have a statewide perspective to know our perspective here in many respects. I won't say it's wrong. I'll say it is our perspective. And that perspective is limiting, just as any one perspective is limiting, right? And so I would caution everyone, exactly to Michael's point, my bigger learning is that I don't agree with a lot of people, places, attitudes, or decisions. This isn't about just blessing and rubber stamping opinions, but it is about hearing people and understanding that their perception is just as valid as my perception is. None of it makes it right, true, gospel, or anything else. And so the more open-minded one is, right, to the reality that everyone's perception is different and everyone's perception and experience is real because it's theirs, right? And so finding the common ground and valuing their perspective will get us a lot further in trying to achieve whatever it is we're trying to achieve than deciding if they're right or wrong. So,
Well, I'm gonna wrap up with my input too, and it's we all three are kind of a lot alike in some ways, and we've talked about that over the years because mine is very similar to what they said too. Before I started Sterling, I was hired to run a new division of Latrim called Intralock. Some of you may have heard of it.
didn't
now.
know that.
Oh yeah, Jay LaPierre called me. I was in Houston. He called me and he said, "Would you?" He goes, "I got your name from Tulane, professor. Would you come to run this startup? My dad invented this plastic conveyor belty thing, and would you come start up this?" And I go, well, I was 27 years old, and I said, "Sure." So so I went and interviewed with Jay, and they hired me, and there was 12 people at Latrim. At Intralocks when I was
Wow.
and I just was invited back by Jay because they're doing a history and they wanted to interview me because I was the first one. And there's now 3,200 employees there. I was there when we put the first injection molding machines in. I remember going to the board meeting and telling J.M. LaPierre, that's Jay's dad, here I am, 27. Said, "Oh, we need to put these two machines in, and because all the molding's being done up in Massachusetts, and all the cost is in, the production of the plastic parts and the freight down here, and and we've got to bring the production in house, and there was no injection molding in Louisiana, so." And I said, it's going to be $2 million. And that $2 million was a lot back then.
Yeah.
And he goes, and all the board members were all the LaPierre brothers and uncles and stuff. And so, and here I am. And they approved it for some reason. And they said, after he goes, "I sure as hell hope you know what you're talking about." I said, "I don't know anything about injection molding, but I can hire somebody that does." And I hired a guy that ran the injection molding at Texas Instruments and da-da-da-da. Anyway, and I was managing, and I'd gone to MBA school, and I had done this, and I majored in finance, and then all of a sudden I was running this, this thing, this startup company and the inventor, and a lot of the people that worked for me were Vietnamese women, and that worked in the plan, assembled the things, and I wasn't trained in, what does being a CEO mean? Right. And then even fast forward when I became the CEO of Sterling, it's like then it dawned on me over these, because you have this idea, well, I'll learn this in school, and I learned this in school, and I learned this in school, and so you learn all these things about skills, you learn about finance, you learn about whatever you learn about, but over the years, and the last several years at Sterling, I said no one really teaches you about leadership. What is leadership, and how do you be a good leader? And sometimes your perception as you come in, particularly in this world and very competitive and want to get ahead, you think leadership means being this and being this and being this, and I have come to the conclusion that leadership, the qualities of a good leader, are not necessarily what people think. And so probably 5 or 6 years ago, before I left Sterling, I actually started a workshop I put together myself called The Qualities of a Good Leader. What are the qualities of a good leader? And I started a leader is not a person that has a title. You can have a title. You could be a CEO and be a boss.
Right.
It makes you a boss, but doesn't make you a leader. A leader is somebody that people want to follow. They want to follow. They don't have to have a title. And so I think the things I learned, because when I realized when I first started at Intralocks, and then when I first started as a CEO, people, I look back and I'm thinking, I made a lot of mistakes, because I was, and then you think, you kind of learn over the years of mistakes what it's like to be a good leader, and sometimes it's surprising what that means. And I wonder now whether those leadership qualities are being taught to Ray.
They are.
To
Are we bringing people like you to help support that?
the dean of business school at Southeastern, and on our advisory board of Palette. But yes, if they, I'm glad to hear that they're being taught, because leadership skills are something that certainly were not taught, back before the dinosaurs.
We have courses, but we of course also rely heavily on our partners. We have lots of partners who come in to speak from experience, and we do sessions, and we do it. We have programs to help people throughout their career beyond a degree that are non-credit programs.
Yeah, and we've have had some folks that have started successful businesses here have said that. They go, I started this thing and I knew, like Justin Greenleaf, who designed this, I knew how to be an architect. I didn't know how to be a CEO. Right. Then I had to run a company. No one taught me how to run a company. So anyway, those are the lessons I learned, and hopefully as we work with small businesses, we can start, translating those. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining me. Thank you for the work you're doing. And
Thanks for having us.
Questions, if anybody has questions?
oh yeah, questions, comments?
I will share, Marty, we had talked about some programming gear around leadership too that we shared with Amanda. So that was
Yes, and I know Amanda introduced me to one of our new members last week at the grand opening, who is a leadership coach, and I'm looking forward to talking to her about what she can do too.
She has a workshop, so the workshops are listed up there. Kat Parker is her name, but we
Yeah. Sam.
Just this is for you guys to answer. Where do y'all see the Northshore, 5 years from now? I asked a couple of other people at Vandy Rain, and got some very pointed answers. So was just curious, you just have 3 different perspectives based on your roles now, and then, where y'all been to get to where you are in the trajectory wise. So could start with whoever.
I think the North Shore is going to continue growing. That seems inevitable at this point. I think the question is that growth going to there's that the parish has to, particularly St. Tammany, has to lean into that growth by building the infrastructure to accommodate it. If it does not do that, then what's going to happen is something that happened to Jefferson Parish, where it was built in the 60s and 70s, but then wasn't really built to accommodate the needs of future generations. And so eventually that growth began to regress. And so, I mean, we talk about this a lot, but it's trying to have people understand, like Richard Campanella said this at Tulane, that cities and parishes are like bicycles. They're either evolving and moving forward and they're stable, or they stop evolving and they wobble and fall over. It's impossible to be static. And so I hope we can engage a conversation here. I think we've been somewhat but not completely successful about how we push St. Tammany and the North Shore to think about what it's going to be in the next, not 5 years, but next 50 years, and begin to build towards that, because that's going to be the recipe for success.
Yeah, Michael did that far more politically correctly and eloquently than I expected, first of all. And I'm really glad he did it. I will simply add this. I have this debate often these days because I now work around a universe of a lot of people who are elected leaders. And there are those who I battle with some days who believe their sole job is to just almost parrot and represent their constituencies through a parroting function. And they believe that's their role, and that's their right to believe that. I believe differently, that I believe leadership also brings a responsibility of vision, and educating and leading your constituents into a direction that is good, better, safer, healthy, whatever words you want to attach to it. That true leadership isn't just parroting and representing an existing perspective. And this is public sector and private sector. This isn't just, I believe it's incumbent on all leaders in this parish and this region to have some responsibility to paint a vision and to lead this parish and this region into exactly what Michael said, understanding that there is no going back, right? Rules of nature. We're not going back. We are, in fact, not blowing up the bridge, right? The old mentality. Because of the very nature of the quality of life that we all enjoy here, want here, and want to protect here, that very asset is going to attract more people here. Like, there's just some laws of nature here, right? And until all of us as leaders, public sector, elected, private sector, all of us as leaders are willing to wrap our arms around a courageous vision and statement in that regard, the bike's going to wobble, the bike's going to fall, or the bike's going to do really well and pedal forward. Those are the three options.
And just to piggyback on that, from personal experience, and again, I won't belabor the long story, but the short story is, over the last 15 years since I was chair of GNO Inc., and the economic development mentality over here was, we don't need GNO Inc. You know, back then, that parish, when President Brister was elected, she asked me to chair her economic development task force, and we had a task force, and we made some fairly significant recommendations as far as because we looked at what St. Tammany, our budget over here for economic development was $200,000. The other parishes, not to mention the other regions, the other parishes were $2 million or so. You know, we had 200,000, and we made some fairly significant recommendations. And you know, and some of those were, you know, change in funding, change in sources of funding, changes in governance structure, ultimately collapsing the Economic Development Foundation and the Economic Development District, which ultimately we did, and ultimately hired Chris Massengill. But the point being, and along the way, the point being is there had to be a different picture, because we were not competitive, even though some people thought we were. And also some people did not want economic development because they wanted their 5-acre lots over here, and they liked that 24-mile bridge that nobody could cross. And so, and I say, well, where are you going to, where are the nurses in the hospitals going to come from? And where are so what Susan just said, somebody's got to paint a vision, and there's got to be leaders of change, and leaders of change are going to take flack, and they're going to take criticism, and they're going to get their names on social media.
Yeah.
Mine was many times on social media accusing me of a lot of things that people didn't even know who I was. I mean, as bad as kickbacks. Oh, you're president of Sterling Properties. You must be taking a kickback for this. You don't know me. So I mean, I think what that means is that exactly right. That I think that sometimes people can either just parrot what their constituents say or lead change, and lead change means lead change, and be willing to go through the slings and arrows to lead change and create that vision.
That's right.
Ryan, you had a question.
Yeah, and Sue, kind of what you said a few minutes ago, and kind of going back to Michael, what you said earlier on. How is the relationship? And I'll use the city of New Orleans. Are they buying into the vision of Governor Landry and all the things that you guys try to change at the state level?
I'll let Michael take the city of New Orleans question, just because I think the city of New Orleans right now has its own political challenges, needless to say, that hopefully we're going to make tremendous progress on in a few months here in an election. But so I really will let Michael speak to the city. I will say around the state, the vast majority of people that we come in contact with, local government, local leaders, are, again, just embracing it all. We live in St. Tammany is far more of an anomaly in this state than you realize, than I realized. I'm not saying y'all don't know. I didn't know. We are an anomaly. I got this question a couple weeks ago, and I'll draw the distinction. Okay, not to talk about Meta again, but I do love talking about Meta. Meta is investing a lot more than $10 billion. I won't do announcement by 1,000 cuts, but the people in Richland Parish, the elected officials, the citizens, you name it, the school board members, the principal of the school that's adjacent to the property where this thing is happening, the unbelievable thanks and welcoming and excitement about what is happening there. And somebody asked me, why do I think it's different here? And you want to know why it is? It's because nobody in St. Tammany's felt starved for opportunity.
That's right.
It's the curse of the riches.
St. Tammany
So-
suffers from winning.
Other places other places that haven't felt the optimism, that haven't felt the opportunity, and those places are all over this state, y'all,
Including New Orleans.
including New Orleans, welcome everything I'm saying that we're doing, from the governor to the legislature. There's not pushback. St. Tammany's a complete anomaly in this regard.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. That's right. I mean, New Orleans as a city welcomes all of this stuff pretty universally across race and class and politics, whether it's the economic development, proactivity, or it's the quality of life enhancements that came around the Super Bowl, or with homelessness. People, if you ask the man on the street or the woman on the street, folks love it. Yeah, no, so it's very enthusiastic.
Well, not so much the folks. I mean, I would think they would, but is the city council getting behind the efforts that on the state level?
Well, if you want to talk, so I mean, I don't think there's any point in talking about the mayor, but if you talk about the city council and the folks that are running to be next mayor, yeah, they are. I mean, so if you listen to Councilmember Moreno or Senator Duplessis, they're basically parroting the GNO Inc. one-page priority, which basically parrots the LED set of priorities. So yeah, there's very little daylight. I mean, you can have Royce Duplessis will talk about how the new port down in St. Bernard is the most important project in the state right now. If you talk to Moreno, she'll talk about the need to improve licensing and permitting so that businesses can grow. I mean, everybody gets it.
What about
Amanda.
Oh, sorry. I have a Down syndrome son in National Down Syndrome Societies in DC, and I've just been on the sidelines, so I'm leaning in, to some of the relationships up in DC and certainly at the state level, and it just seems like maybe we're in a perfect storm with, I think, as y'all talked about at the state level, hey, let's take this, and hopefully that'll take 8 years. But it just seems like at the federal level too.
Yeah, I mean, there are 424 days till midterms. That's the problem. Is that right now we've got this alignment all the way, starting with Mike Johnson and the president, who the governor can call on his cell phone,
And does all the time, by the way.
and that's gonna.
Bit of a nuisance at this point, I think.
But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of pressure to make hay while the sun is shining, I think.
I will tell you what the speaker said at Washington Mardi Gras last year. I thought this was just brilliant, and maybe I know we're on Facebook Live. Maybe he doesn't want me attributing this to him. But no state in the history of this country has ever had the number 1 and number 2 leadership positions in that. It's never happened before. And then to think that is coming out of a state with six members of Congress. 2 of them are the number 1 and number 2 leaders of the U.S. Congress right now on the House side, obviously. No, it's never happened. And then there's another fascinating piece, and that is serving our state incredibly well, and this is so underreported. The odd trajectory of Jeff Landry's career, having been a congressman briefly, an attorney general for 8 years, and a governor. If you look at the cabinet, you know who they are? They are former congressional members, they are former attorney generals, and they're former governors. And so not only can the governor get on the phone with the president, and I'm not kidding. I mean, there have been multiple issues where he just calls him, and it works. As importantly, he does it with every cabinet secretary. I get a phone call 2 weeks ago that said, "You'll love this. Susan, I'm meeting with the Corps of Engineers tomorrow, the head, colonel, whatever the head of the Corps would be, right?" And he said, "Give me a list of every permit your projects are waiting on. Give me a list." And I literally sent him an Excel spreadsheet that he handed to the head of the Corps of Engineers. And he said, "Tell the president this is what we're waiting on." Like that's happening day in and day out. And Louisiana is an incredibly unique and enviable position as it relates to all of that right now. We really are.
Is that we're probably not going to have for 8 years, and so that's why there's a lot of pressure right now to get the port
Make hay.
that is possible to make.
That's right. Make hay.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that makes me nervous is that the governor does fit every criteria of being a cabinet member, and so okay.
We can do to help and support any of that, or is there enough? Just
No, I think that citizen input and support is incredibly important because in some cases it's just a validation point. In some cases, because you saw a problem, you own the problem, and you become the leader on it. So maybe on Down syndrome issues, you become the spokesperson for Louisiana. So no, I think it's totally underrated how
I agree.
good individuals can be.
Amanda, you want to wrap up and everything?
Yeah, well, I have 2 questions. So I would say I would love for you to get your unbridled answer to these 2 as well. So there are several of us in the ring who went to the SIU executive games, when anyone going, but it was very eye-opening for people who have young families. And I'm going to get the statistic wrong, but you gave a statistic of how many people graduate college and leave the state to find jobs. And kind of how if we don't create jobs, it's going to continue to happen. I'm one, Chenzo one, we both left, we came back, but coming back is the rare part. Do you think that we're on our way to keeping the high-end talent in our state? Or do we need to be doing more of that? And I know Meta is a big part of that, but like aside from Meta.
Yeah. So yes and yes to your 2 questions. So the statistic is, and this is, we would love for this to be a secret, right? I'm going to go ahead and say it on Facebook Live, but it's not a secret, is that everyone knows Louisiana's out-migration challenges, right? We have lost population. What we discovered when McKinsey did our strategic plan last year is if you actually dig down in that data, the vast majority of those people, of that out-migration, were bachelor's and master's level people. That's who's leaving. And that is sort of, to coin Michael's term on some other issues, that could be a death spiral for a state. If that goes unchecked, right? We educate them, we're producing incredible products, and that is the extremely overweight population demographic, if you will, that's leaving. So that's the statistic. Here's the good news. The good news is that, and we're about to invest a lot of money in this. At the end of the day, I started off by saying this perception and reality problem is coupled. The opportunity is here. There are more six-figure jobs in Louisiana available right now than there are people to fill them from a qualifications perspective. The opportunity is here. The perception of opportunity is not here. So I have the 23-year-old who thought he needed to go someplace else. And but for my role, he didn't get the job because of my role. I forced him to pay attention to the opportunity because of my role. And he ended up staying, and he had offers in 4 other states. But, right, we can't, not all of us can concierge manage our children's, our children's path. At the end of the day, the opportunity is here, the opportunity is growing, but I want to use Meta as an example. Meta's not the answer, by the way. I mean, I love what Meta's doing. Meta's not the answer, but here's the anecdote that's really important. The lady who's project managing it on the ground in Richland Parish called me and she said, Susan, you have no idea how many Louisianians apparently live in who work in Meta, former Louisianians, because the amount of emails I'm getting from all over this company, all over the world saying, I'm from Louisiana, is there an opportunity for me to go back there?
That's right.
And she's blown away.
And that's the virtuous cycle. That's the opposite.
That's exactly
these
right.
things kind of tend to accrete to each other,
Yep.
and why like a Meta is significant in a way far beyond that one
Yeah.
data center.
Yeah. So it's happening. And so stay tuned. We inside of LED are launching what we're calling the Louisiana Opportunity Campaign. The first part of that is actually telling the story inside of Louisiana because of what I said about us being our own worst enemies. But more importantly, moving forward, we are going to spend a significant amount of money on reminding, right, that expat talent that there's opportunity here, and then an even larger audience. So, and I've got to go.
The food in the family can give me a reason to come back to the finance.
Yeah.
I'm there.
We did, God, if you haven't seen it, go find it. It's on our website. We did a one-time spot. I mean, we didn't do very much with it, but it was a Come Home Louisiana spot. And the whole thematic part of the commercial was, it says, you know what you miss. And that was the crawfish boil and, right, the festival. But do you know what you're missing? And then it was just statistic after statistic after statistic about the actual opportunity. Yeah. And that's real. Like, we didn't make, like, those were real. Both of those things. You know what you miss, but do you know what you're missing?
Well,
I gotta go.
we've covered a lot of ground here, in these,
11:15.
these two guys. I know you can. I
was like, what?
Who's going to want to hear us talk?
I know. I thought surely no one
Anyway,
wants to
there's
listen
a
to
lot
us that long.
Talk about, lot to digest. Maybe we'll have a follow up in the future, see how things are going. But
Right.
thank you all for coming, and
Thank y'all.